My name is Evelyn. I am 28 years old, and I live in Denver. It started with a knock on my door that shattered my peaceful Saturday morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I live a quiet life here in Denver, far away from the chaos of my childhood home. When I looked through the peephole, my breath hitched. It was them, my parents. I opened the door, my hand trembling just a little. They stood there, looking older, wearing smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. They came inside, looking around my apartment like they were inspecting merchandise. They didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask about my job. They just sat down on my gray sofa and dropped the bomb. "Evelyn," my mother said, grabbing my hand with a warmth that felt fake. "We need a favor. It's for Alina, her wedding. It needs to be perfect. We need $75,000. The room went silent. I stared at them. These were the same people who told me years ago that paying for my college was shameful. They watched me struggle. They watched me starve. And now, they wanted my hard-earned money to pay for a party for their favorite daughter. Something inside me didn't just break. It finally woke up. But before I tell you how everything flipped, like and subscribe, drop a comment. Where are you watching from? My name is Evelyn. I am 28 years old. If you asked my parents, they would probably describe me as the quiet one or the independent one. But those are just polite words for the invisible one. For as long as I can remember, I lived in a house that felt like a theater stage where my sister, Alina, was the star, and I was the stagehand working in the dark. Alina was 2 years younger than me. She was bubbly, loud, and demanding. She had golden hair and a smile that seemed to trick everyone into giving her whatever she wanted. I was different. I had dark hair, serious eyes, and a quiet voice. Growing up, the rules in our house were unspoken but very clear. Alina's happiness was the priority. My stability was the expectation. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had asked for a small gathering, just a few friends and a chocolate cake. My mother had promised me she would make it. I spent the whole week looking forward to it. I cleaned my room. I finished all my homework early. I wanted everything to be perfect. On the morning of my birthday, Alina woke up with a slight cough. It wasn't a fever. It wasn't the flu. It was just a dry cough. But my mother went into panic mode. "Oh, my poor angel," my mother cooed, feeling Alina's forehead for the 10th time. "We can't have people over with you feeling like this. You need rest." "But Mom," I said, my voice small. "It's my birthday. My friends are coming in 2 hours." My father looked up from his newspaper. He didn't look at me with sympathy. He looked at me with annoyance. "Evelyn, don't be selfish. Your sister is unwell. We can't have a house full of screaming girls disturbing her." "I can be quiet," I pleaded. "We'll stay in the backyard." "No," my mother said firmly. "I'm canceling it. We will order pizza, and we can watch a movie that Alina likes so she feels better." That was it. My birthday was canceled because Alina coughed. That night, we watched Alina's favorite cartoon. I sat in the corner of the sofa, eating a slice of cold pizza, while my parents huddled around Alina, feeding her soup and adjusting her blanket. No one said happy birthday to me again that night. I learned a hard lesson that day. In this family, my needs were negotiable. Alina's were mandatory. This pattern continued into our teenage years. I was the reliable one. I got straight A's. I never missed curfew. I did my own laundry. I packed my own lunches. My parents never checked my report cards because they assumed I would do well. When I brought home a perfect score on a math test, my dad would just nod and say, "Good, that's what we expect." But if Alina got a C-, it was a crisis. They would hire tutors. They would sit with her for hours, helping her with homework, encouraging her, praising her for the smallest effort. "Look, Evelyn," my mom would say, beaming. "Alina finished her history essay. Isn't that wonderful?" "I finished mine 3 days ago," I would say. "Well, you're naturally smart," Mom would wave a hand dismissively. "It's harder for her. You should be more supportive." I became the emotional shock absorber for the family. If my parents fought, I was the one who cleaned up the broken dishes. If Alina came home crying because a boy didn't like her, I was the one told to comfort her. "Go talk to your sister," Dad would tell me. "She looks up to you." But she didn't look up to me. She looked past me. She knew, just as well as I did, that she was the center of their universe. I was just a satellite orbiting around them, useful but distant. I remember one Christmas when I was 16. I had been saving my allowance for months to buy a special sketchbook. I loved to draw. It was my escape. I hinted to my parents for weeks that I wanted art supplies. On Christmas morning, I watched Alina tear open box after box. She got the designer jeans she wanted. She got a new phone. She got tickets to a concert. Her pile of gifts was huge. Then they handed me my gift. It was a single, flat box. My heart beat a little faster. Maybe they had listened. Maybe they had bought me the professional art set. I opened it. Inside was a set of textbooks. SAT prep guide and advanced calculus. I stared at the books. I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. "We want to make sure you get into a good college," my father said, patting me on the shoulder. "We know you're focused on your future. Practical gifts are the best gifts." "Did you get me anything else?" I asked, hating how pathetic I sounded. "Don't be ungrateful," my mother snapped. "Those books were expensive. Alina needed clothes because she's growing so fast. You have plenty of clothes." I looked at Alina. She was holding up a cashmere sweater, squealing with delight. She didn't even look at my textbooks. She didn't care. I went to my room and cried for an hour. It wasn't about the presents. It was about being seen. They saw Alina as a person to be cherished. They saw me as a project to be managed. They loved her. They relied on me. And there is a very big, very painful difference between being loved and being useful. I started to build a wall around my heart then. I stopped sharing my feelings with them. I stopped telling them about my drawings. I stopped telling them about the boys I liked or the dreams I had. I became exactly what they wanted, quiet, efficient, and low maintenance. But deep down, I was screaming. I wanted them to ask me how my day was. I wanted them to hug me without me asking first. I wanted to be the daughter they adored, not just the daughter they expected things from. I didn't know then that the worst betrayal was yet to come. I thought the favoritism was just about birthdays and Christmas presents. I didn't realize that, when it came to my actual future, their neglect would nearly destroy me. The envelope was thick. That was the first thing I noticed when I pulled it out of the mailbox. My hands were shaking so hard, I almost dropped it in the snow. It was from the University of Colorado, the cybersecurity program. It was one of the best programs in the country, and it was competitive. I ran inside the house, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Mom, Dad," I yelled. It was a Tuesday evening. My parents were in the kitchen. Mom was cooking lasagna, Alina's favorite. Dad was reading a magazine. Alina was sitting at the counter, texting on her phone. "What is it, Evelyn?" Dad asked, not looking up. "No need to shout." "I got in," I breathed out, ripping the envelope open. I pulled out the letter and scanned the first few lines. "I got in. I got accepted into the cybersecurity program." For a second, there was silence. I waited for the explosion of joy. I waited for my mom to drop the spoon and hug me. I waited for my dad to high-five me. "That's nice, dear," Mom said, turning back to the stove. "Could you set the table?" "Alina, honey, do you want garlic bread?" I stood there, frozen. The letter hung in my hand. "Did you hear me? I got into the program. It's my dream school." Dad finally put down his magazine. He took off his reading glasses and looked at me with a serious expression. "We heard you, Evelyn. It's a good accomplishment. You studied hard." "But," I hesitated, "I need to send the deposit by next week. And we need to figure out the tuition." "I applied for financial aid, but because of your income, I didn't get much. I'll need you to co-sign a loan, or—" The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. It went from indifferent to cold. My father stood up. He was a tall man, intimidating when he wanted to be. "Evelyn, sit down." I sat at the table, clutching my acceptance letter. Alina didn't look up from her phone, but I saw a small smirk on her face. "We need to be clear about something," my father said. "We have discussed this. We are not paying for your college." I blinked. "What? But you paid for my private high school. You talked about college my whole life." "That was different," Mom chimed in, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "College is expensive, and we believe that taking on debt is shameful. If you want this degree, you need to earn it yourself. We aren't going to hand it to you." "I'm not asking you to hand it to me," I stammered. "I'm asking for help. The tuition is $40,000 a year. I can't make that working a minimum wage job. I just need you to co-sign a loan. I'll pay it back, I promise." "No," Dad said. The word was sharp, like a door slamming shut. "We will not put our names on debt. It's risky. If you fail, we are on the hook. We have our retirement to think about. We have the house." "But you bought Alina a car last month," I said, my voice rising. "You bought her a brand new Jeep because she passed her driving test on the second try." "That is different," Mom said defensively. "Alina needs to get to school safely. She's delicate. She gets anxious on the bus." "I'm going to lose my spot," I shouted, tears finally spilling over. "If I don't pay the deposit, I lose my spot." Please, this is my future. This is everything I worked for. Those textbooks you gave me for Christmas, I used them, I did everything you asked. My father crossed his arms. This is a lesson in resilience, Evelyn. If you want it bad enough, you will find a way. Character is built through struggle. We are doing this for your own good. We don't want you to be spoiled. Spoiled. The word rang in my ears. I looked at Alina, who was sipping a soda, wearing the designer sweater they bought her. I looked at my parents, standing in their nice kitchen in their nice house. They weren't broke, they just didn't want to spend their money on me. I can't believe you, I whispered. You're supposed to be on my side. We are, Mom said calmly. We are teaching you to be an adult. Now, please wash your hands for dinner. I didn't stay for dinner. I grabbed my coat and ran out the back door. I ran until my lungs burned. I ended up at my grandparents' house, 3 miles away. Eldon and Margaret lived in a small, cozy bungalow that smelled like peppermint tea and old paper. When my grandmother opened the door and saw my tear-streaked face, she didn't ask questions. She just pulled me inside. I sat at their small kitchen table and sobbed. I told them everything. I told them about the letter, the refusal, the car they bought Alina. Grandpa Eldon sat quietly, his jaw tight. Grandma Margaret stroked my hair. They won't sign, I choked out. I can't go, I have to decline the offer. Grandpa Eldon cleared his throat. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. His hands were weathered and shaky, but his voice was steady. How much is the deposit? He asked. Grandpa, no, I said. It's $500 just to hold the spot, but the tuition. We can't pay the tuition, Evie, Grandma said softly. We don't have that kind of money, but we can help you with the deposit. And you can live here. You can stay in the spare room, it's closer to the city, you can take the bus. I'll still need to pay for classes, I said, wiping my eyes. You will work, Grandpa said. You are strong, stronger than your parents realize. You will work and you will take fewer classes at a time if you have to, but you will not give up. I looked at them, these 2 old people who lived on a pension, offering me everything they had. They were giving me the support my parents refused. Why are they like this? I asked, my voice breaking. Why do they hate me? They don't hate you, honey, Grandma sighed. They see you as the grown-up. They think you don't need them. It's not right, but it's how they are. That night, I slept in my grandparents' spare room. I felt a strange mixture of heartbreak and determination. My parents had cut me loose. They had thrown me into the deep end, expecting me to drown or swim alone. I decided right then that I would swim. I would swim so far away from them that they would never be able to pull me under again. The next 4 years were a blur of exhaustion. I moved in with my grandparents, sleeping on a twin mattress in a room filled with Grandma's sewing boxes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe. It was a home where I was welcomed, not tolerated. My parents didn't stop me from moving out. In fact, they seemed relieved. It meant one less mouth to feed, one less person to worry about. They called occasionally, but the conversations were short. How is school? Mom would ask. It's hard, I would say. I'm tired. Well, keep at it, she'd reply before launching into a 10-minute story about Alina's drama club or Alina's prom dress. I stopped listening. I focused on survival. I worked 3 jobs. In the mornings, from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., I stocked shelves at a grocery store. Then I went to class until 2 p.m. From 3 p.m. to 10 p.m., I waited tables at a diner. On weekends, I cleaned offices. I was always tired. My bones ached. My eyes burned from staring at computer screens and textbooks. I ate whatever was cheapest, instant ramen, peanut butter sandwiches, leftover fries from the diner. I lost weight. I had dark circles under my eyes. But I paid my tuition, every single cent. I took out the maximum federal student loans I could get without a cosigner, and I paid the rest in cash. It meant I couldn't go to parties. I couldn't buy new clothes. I wore the same sneakers until the soles wore through and let the rain in. I remember one winter day, I was walking to the bus stop. It was snowing hard. My coat was thin and I was shivering uncontrollably. I saw a car drive past, a silver Jeep. It was Alina. She was laughing with her friends, the heat blasting inside the car. She didn't see me. She drove right through a puddle, splashing slush onto my legs. I stood there, freezing and wet, watching my sister drive away in the car my parents bought her. I didn't cry. I didn't have the energy to cry. I just felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. I will succeed, I told myself. And I will owe them nothing. Graduation day came. I graduated magna cum laude, top of my class. My parents came to the ceremony. They took a few photos. We're proud of you, Dad said, smiling for the camera. We knew you could do it. See, we told you that you didn't need handouts. I looked at him in his nice suit. He truly believed he had done me a favor. He believed his neglect was a teaching strategy. Thanks, I said simply. I didn't hug him back. After graduation, I landed a job as a junior cybersecurity analyst at a major firm in Denver. The starting salary was more money than I had ever seen. The first thing I did was take my grandparents out for a fancy dinner. I bought them steaks and wine. I watched Grandpa smile, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and I felt a swell of pride. I had done this. We had done this. I moved into my own apartment. It was modern, clean, and quiet. I bought a gray sofa. I bought a big TV. I bought art supplies, expensive ones. I filled my fridge with fresh food. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hungry. I wasn't tired. I was safe. But the dynamic with my family didn't change. If anything, it got worse. Now that I had money, they assumed I was fine. They assumed I had no problems. I would go home for Sunday dinner sometimes, mostly out of guilt. The conversation was always about Alina. Alina dropped out of college after one semester because it was too stressful. My parents were sympathetic. They let her move back home rent-free. They paid for her to go to cosmetology school, then she quit that too. Then she wanted to be an influencer. They bought her cameras and lighting equipment. Alina is just finding herself, Mom would say. Meanwhile, nobody asked about my job. Nobody asked about the cyber attacks I was thwarting or the promotions I was getting. I was just the background character who had made it, so I no longer required attention. I remember one dinner vividly. I had just been promoted to senior analyst. It was a huge deal. I got a promotion, I announced over the pot roast. That's nice, Evelyn, Dad said, chewing. Pass the salt. Alina met a boy, Mom interrupted, her eyes wide. His name is Julian. He comes from a very wealthy family. His father owns a chain of hotels. Can you believe it? He drives a Porsche, Alina added, grinning. He's taking me to Cabo next week. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom clapped her hands. You deserve a vacation. I sat there, gripping my fork. I had worked 80-hour weeks for 4 years. I had pulled myself out of poverty. And they were more impressed that Alina was dating a guy with a Porsche. I realized then that it would never be enough. No matter how successful I became, I would never sparkle like Alina did in their eyes. I was the workhorse. She was the show pony, so I stopped trying to impress them. I pulled back, I visited less. I focused on my life in Denver. I made friends who liked me for me. I started hiking. I started painting again. I found peace in the silence of my apartment. I thought I had escaped. I thought the worst was over. I thought that because I didn't ask them for anything, they couldn't hurt me anymore. I was wrong. That brings us back to today, to the knock on the door, to my parents sitting on my gray sofa, looking out of place in my sanctuary. My mother was still holding my hand. Her palm felt sweaty. The silence in the room was deafening after she dropped the number. $75,000. I pulled my hand away slowly. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the Denver skyline. I needed a moment to make sure I hadn't hallucinated the request. I'm sorry, I said, turning back to them. My voice was calm, shockingly calm. Did you say $75,000? It's for the wedding, Mom said, her voice rushing now, trying to fill the silence. You know Alina and Julian are getting married. It's going to be the event of the year, Evelyn, Julian's family. They are very high society. We can't embarrass ourselves. The venue alone is $30,000. Then there's the catering, the dress, the flowers. The flowers, I repeated. You want me to pay for flowers? It's not just flowers, Dad said, leaning forward. He used his reasonable business voice. It's the whole package. Look, Evelyn, we've looked at the numbers. We can cover about $20,000. Julian's parents are paying for the honeymoon and the rehearsal dinner, but the wedding reception falls to the bride's family. That's tradition. And you don't have the money, I stated. We have some, Dad said, clearing his throat. But the market has been down, and we have expenses, we thought. Well, you're doing so well. We know you have a good salary. You don't have kids, you don't have a husband, you have savings. I have savings because I work, I said. I have savings because I didn't go on vacations. I have savings because I ate ramen for 4 years. Evelyn, don't start with the drama, Mom sighed. This is family, it's your sister's big day. She looks up to you so much. She wants you to be the maid of honor, I laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. She wants me to be the maid of honor. Or she wants the person with the checkbook to stand next to her. That is an awful thing to say, Mom snapped. She loves you. She loves what I can provide, I corrected. Why does she need $100,000 wedding? Why can't she have a wedding she can afford? Because of Julian, Mom exclaimed. We told you. His family expects a certain standard. We can't look like paupers next to them. It reflects on all of us. It reflects on you too. It doesn't reflect on me, I said. I don't know these people. It's family duty, Dad said, standing up to loom over me. We raised you. We put a roof over your head. We fed you. Now the family needs help. You are in a position to help. It is selfish to hoard your money when your sister's happiness is at stake. Selfish, the word tasted like bile in my mouth. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the hypocrisy etched into their faces. These were the people who told an 18-year-old girl that debt was shameful. These were the people who watched me walk into the snow with thin shoes because they wouldn't buy me boots, but bought Alina a car. These were the people who refused to co-sign a loan for my education, an investment in my future, but were now demanding cash for a party. They didn't see my money as mine. They saw it as a family resource that I had just happened to collect for them. They thought that because I was the reliable one, I would just say yes. They thought they could guilt me into it. You told me, I said quietly, that you wouldn't pay for my college because you wanted to teach me resilience. You said you wouldn't support me because you had your retirement to think about. That was different, Dad dismissed. You were a child, we were teaching you values. So where are Alina's values? I asked. Why doesn't she have to learn resilience? Why doesn't she have to struggle? Why is her happiness worth $75,000 of my money, but my education wasn't worth a signature on a piece of paper? Stop living in the past, Mom cried out. This is about now. This is about your sister. If you don't do this, the wedding will be a disaster. She will be heartbroken. Do you want to be responsible for ruining her wedding? They were doing it again, making me the villain. If I said yes, I was being used. If I said no, I was the bad sister who ruined the wedding. But something had shifted in me. Maybe it was the years of silence. Maybe it was the memory of my grandfather's shaking hands writing that check for my deposit. Maybe it was just the sheer audacity of their request. I wasn't the scared little girl at the kitchen table anymore. I was a woman who had built a fortress out of her own scars. I need you to leave, I said. My parents looked stunned. What? I need you to leave my apartment, I said, walking to the door and opening it. I need to think. I'm not writing you a check today. Go. Evelyn, be reasonable, Dad started. Out, I shouted. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice at my father. They scrambled up, looking terrified and offended. They grabbed their coats and marched to the door. We expect an answer by Friday, Dad spat out as he walked past me. Don't disappoint us, Evelyn, again. I slammed the door shut and locked it. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from rage. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor. I looked around my quiet, empty apartment. They wanted to take this from me. They wanted to take my safety, my hard work, and turn it into confetti and champagne for Alina. I pulled out my phone. I didn't call my parents. I didn't call Alina. I opened my banking app. I looked at the number in my savings account. It was a number that represented my freedom. Then, I opened my photo gallery and scrolled back years. I found a photo of me and my grandparents on my graduation day. They were the only ones who had ever really invested in me. I knew what I had to do, but I needed to gather my strength first. I stood up, wiped my face, and grabbed my car keys. I wasn't going to sit here and stew. I was going to go to the only place that felt like home. I was going to see Grandma Margaret. After my parents left my apartment, the silence they left behind was heavy. It felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I stood by the door for a long time. My heart was beating fast, like a drum in my chest. I looked at the spot on the sofa where they had sat. It looked like a normal sofa, but it felt contaminated. They had come into my safe space, my home, and they had tried to break me again. I needed to get out. I couldn't stay in that room. The walls felt like they were closing in on me. I grabbed my car keys from the hook by the door. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped them. I put on my coat. I didn't even check the mirror. I didn't care how I looked. I just needed to be somewhere else, somewhere safe. I went down to the garage and got into my car. It was a reliable sedan, nothing fancy, but I paid for it with my own money. Every time I started the engine, I felt a little spark of pride. Today, I didn't feel pride. I felt sick. I drove out of the city, heading toward the suburbs, heading toward the only place that had ever really felt like home. The drive to my grandparents' house usually took 30 minutes. Today, it felt like hours. My mind was racing. I kept hearing my father's voice. Family duty, selfish, $75,000. The words bounced around my head like a bad song I couldn't turn off. I started thinking about money. Not just the money they wanted now, but the money from before. I remembered my freshman year of college. I remembered standing in the grocery store aisle, holding a loaf of bread and a jar of peanut butter. I remembered counting the coins in my palm. I had exactly $3.50. The bread was $2. The peanut butter was $3. I couldn't afford both. I had to choose. I bought the peanut butter because it had more protein. I ate it with a spoon for dinner for 3 days. Where were my parents then? They were on a cruise. They had sent me a postcard, having a great time. Hope school is fun. They were drinking cocktails while I was deciding between bread and peanut butter. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. My knuckles turned white. The anger was starting to boil. It wasn't the hot, explosive anger I felt earlier. It was something else. It was cold. It was hard. It was the anger of someone who finally sees the truth. I pulled into the driveway of my grandparents' small white house. The gravel crunched under my tires. The sound was familiar and comforting. I turned off the engine and just sat there for a minute. I looked at the house. The paint was peeling a little bit on the porch. The flower beds were overgrown. It wasn't a perfect house. It wasn't a mansion like the one my parents lived in. But it was filled with love. I got out of the car and walked up the steps. I didn't knock. I used the spare key hidden under the mat. I opened the door and the smell hit me immediately. It smelled like old books, peppermint tea, and lavender. It smelled like safety. "Grandma," I called out. My voice sounded weak. "In the kitchen, dear," she answered. I walked into the kitchen. Grandma Margaret was sitting at the wooden table. She was peeling apples. Her hands were wrinkled and spotted with age, but they moved with a steady rhythm. Grandpa Eldon was sitting in his favorite armchair in the corner, reading a newspaper with a magnifying glass. When Grandma looked up and saw me, she stopped peeling. She put the knife down. She saw my face. She saw the red eyes. She saw the shaking hands. "Oh, Evelyn," she said softly. "Come here." She stood up and opened her arms. I walked into them and I just collapsed. I started crying. I cried for the 18-year-old girl who was hungry. I cried for the 20-year-old who worked until her feet bled. I cried for the woman who just wanted her parents to love her without a price tag. Grandma held me tight. She was small and frail now, but she felt like a mountain. She didn't say anything. She just let me cry. Grandpa put down his paper and watched us, his eyes sad but kind. After a while, I pulled away. Grandma wiped my face with a tissue. "Sit down," she said. "I'll make tea." I sat at the table. I watched her move around the kitchen. She put the kettle on. She got out the mugs. It was such a simple routine, but it grounded me. "They came to see me," I said. My voice was raspy. "Your parents?" Grandpa asked from his chair. "Yes," I said. "They want money. For Alina's wedding." Grandma snorted. It was a very unladylike sound. "Of course they do. How much?" $75,000, I said. Grandma dropped the teaspoon. It clattered onto the counter. Grandpa let out a low whistle. "75,000, Grandma repeated. "For a party, have they lost their minds?" "They said it's my duty," I said, looking down at the table. "They said I owe them because they raised me. They said I'm selfish for keeping the money I earned." "That is nonsense," Grandpa said firmly. He stood up slowly, leaning on his cane. He walked over to the table and sat down next to me. "Evelyn, look at me." I looked at him. His blue eyes were faded, but they were sharp. "You don't owe them a penny," he said. "Raising a child is not a business deal. You don't invest in a kid expecting a payout. You do it because you love them. If they think you owe them, then they didn't raise you, they just boarded you." I felt guilty, I admitted, when they were in my apartment, looking at me with that disappointment. I felt like a bad daughter. "You are not a bad daughter," Grandma said, placing a mug of hot tea in front of me. "They are bad parents. I'm sorry to say it because they are my family too, but it's the truth. They chose a favorite a long time ago. They put Alina on a pedestal and they put you in the basement. And now that you've built your own house, they want to move in." I took a sip of the tea. It was hot and sweet. It warmed my chest. "I kept all the bills," I whispered. "From college, I have a box in my closet. Every loan statement, every receipt for textbooks, every pay stub from the diner." "Why did you keep them?" Grandma asked gently. "To remind myself," I said. "To remind myself that I did it alone. But now, Looking back, it just makes me angry. Why did it have to be so hard? Why couldn't they just help me a little bit? They bought Alina a car. They pay her rent. Why was I not worth it? Because you were strong, Grandpa said. And they are weak people. Weak people are intimidated by strength. They saw that you didn't need them and it scared them. Alina needs them. That makes them feel important. You make them feel unnecessary. That hit me hard. I had never thought about it that way. I always thought they ignored me because I wasn't good enough. But maybe they ignored me because I was too good. Too independent. I didn't feed their ego. I'm going to say no, I said. The words felt heavy but right. I'm going to tell them I won't pay. Good, Grandma said. Stand your ground, Evie. You worked too hard for that safety to give it away for a chocolate fountain and a DJ. They might cut me off, I said. They might stop talking to me. Grandma reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Let them. If they stop talking to you because you won't give them money, then they aren't talking to you. They are talking to your wallet. You are better off without that noise. I stayed with them for hours. We didn't talk about the wedding anymore. We talked about Grandpa's garden. We talked about a show Grandma was watching. It was normal. It was peaceful. It was what family was supposed to be. By the time I left, the sun was setting. The sky was a deep purple. I got back in my car. I didn't feel sick anymore. I felt something new. I felt solid, like a brick wall that had finally dried and set. I drove back to my apartment. I went inside. I looked at the sofa again. It didn't look contaminated anymore. It just looked like furniture. I was reclaiming my space. I was reclaiming my life. I knew they would come back. I knew the fight wasn't over. But for the first time, I knew I was going to win. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I finally loved myself enough to protect myself. The week dragged on. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach clenched, thinking it was them. But they didn't call. They were waiting. They had given me a deadline. Friday. They expected me to show up with a check or transfer the money. They expected me to cave like I always did when I was younger. But Friday came and I didn't go to them. I stayed home. I took the day off work. I needed to be ready. I knew they wouldn't just let the deadline pass. They would come to me. I spent the morning cleaning my apartment. I scrubbed the counters until they sparkled. I vacuumed the rugs. I organized my bookshelf. It was a nervous energy. I needed to do something with my hands. I wanted my space to be perfect. I wanted to show them that my life was orderly, controlled, and successful without their help. I dressed carefully. I didn't wear my comfortable sweatpants. I put on a crisp white shirt and black trousers. I put on my shoes. I wanted to feel professional. I wanted to feel like the senior cybersecurity analyst I was, not the scared little girl they remembered. At 10 a.m. the doorbell rang. It was sharp and demanding. I took a deep breath. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. It was them. Mom and Dad. They were dressed up too. Dad was in a suit. Mom was wearing a silk blouse. They looked like they were going to a business meeting. In a way, they were. They were here to close the deal on their daughter. I opened the door. Evelyn, Dad said. He didn't say hello. He just said my name like it was a checklist item. We're here for the answer. Come in, I said. My voice was steady. I was proud of that. They walked in. Dad was carrying a leather folder. He placed it on my coffee table with a thud. This is the contract for the venue, he said, tapping the folder. We need the deposit today. And the rest of the vendor payments are due next week. We figured it would be easiest if you just wrote one check to us, and we will handle the distribution. That way you don't have to deal with the stress of the planning. He was so confident. He spoke as if my agreement was a foregone conclusion, as if the last time we spoke I hadn't kicked them out. Sit down, I said. They sat on the sofa. I didn't sit. I stood by the window, keeping a distance between us. I needed the high ground. I'm not writing a check, I said. I didn't lead up to it. I didn't apologize, I just said it. The air in the room froze. My mother blinked as if she hadn't heard me correctly. My father's confident smile faltered. Excuse me, Dad said. We don't have time for games, Evelyn. The bank closes at 5. It's not a game, I said. I am not giving you $75,000. I am not giving you any money for Alina's wedding. Evelyn, be reasonable, Mom said, her voice rising in pitch. We told you, this is vital. The invitations are already drafted. People are expecting this wedding. Julian's family is expecting it. Then Julian's family can pay for it, I said. Or you can pay for it, or Alina can pay for it. We can't afford it, Dad snapped. The polite businessman mask slipped, revealing the anger underneath. We told you that. Our liquidity is tied up. We need you to step up. This is what family does, we help each other. Help, I laughed. It was a cold, dry laugh. You want to talk about help? Let's talk about help. Where was the help when I was 18? Oh God, not this again, Mom groaned, throwing her hands up. Why do you always bring up the past? You are so bitter, Evelyn. It's ugly. I bring it up because it matters, I said. You refused to help me with 4 years of college tuition. That was an investment in my future. You said no. You said debt was shameful. You said I had to learn the hard way. And look at you, Dad gestured around the apartment. You did well, our method worked. You are successful because we were tough on you. You should be thanking us. My jaw dropped. The audacity was breathtaking. You think I'm successful because you abandoned me. I'm successful despite you abandoning me. I'm successful because Grandpa and Grandma helped me with the deposit. I'm successful because I didn't sleep for 4 years. You don't get to take credit for the house you refused to help build. We are your parents, Dad shouted, standing up. His face was turning red. We gave you life. We fed you for 18 years. You owe us. I don't owe you for the basics of parenting, I shouted back. You chose to have children. Feeding me was your legal obligation, not a favor, and even if I did owe you. Why doesn't Alina owe you? Why does she get a free ride? Why does she get a car and rent and now a wedding? Alina is different, Mom cried. She needs us. She's not like you. She's sensitive. She can't handle the stress you can. If we don't help her, she will crumble. Then let her crumble, I said. Maybe if she crumbled, she would learn how to build herself back up. Like I did. But you won't let her. You keep propping her up with cash. And now you want to use my cash to prop her up. Well, I'm not doing it. I'm not enabling her anymore. You are jealous, Dad spat. You have always been jealous of her. You're jealous because she's happy and lovable and you are cold and hard. The words stung. They aimed for the weak spots. Cold, hard, unlovable. I am hard because I had to be, I said quietly. I had to be hard to survive you. If you don't do this, Mom said, standing up to join Dad. Her eyes were wild. If you don't write this check, you are turning your back on this family. Do you understand? You won't be welcome at Christmas. You won't be welcome at the house. We will be done with you. The threat hung in the air. The ultimate weapon. Do what we want, or we will stop loving you. I looked at them. I looked at my mother, who had never hugged me the way she hugged Alina. I looked at my father, who only looked at me with pride when he thought he could get something from me. I realized something profound. I wasn't losing anything. You can't lose something you never really had. Their love was conditional, it was a transaction, and the price was too high. Okay, I said. My parents froze. What? Dad asked. I said okay, I repeated. If the price of being in this family is $75,000, I'm not paying it. If you want to disown me over money, then go ahead. But I want you to remember this moment. Remember that you chose a party over your daughter. You chose appearances over me. You will regret this, Dad stammered. He looked unsure now. The threat hadn't worked. He had no other cards to play. I don't think I will, I said. Now please leave, I have work to do. You're making a huge mistake, Evelyn, Mom sobbed. It was a fake, manipulative sob. You are breaking my heart. You broke mine a long time ago, Mom, I said. I just finally stopped trying to fix it. I walked to the door and held it open. I stared at them. I didn't blink. I was a statue. They gathered their things. Dad grabbed the leather folder. He looked at me with pure hatred. Don't expect an invitation to the wedding or the funeral. Noted, I said. They walked out into the hallway. I was about to slam the door when I heard a noise, a gasp. I looked past my parents. Standing in the hallway, leaning against the wall, was Alina. Alina looked terrible. That was my first thought. My beautiful, perfect sister, who always looked like she had just walked out of a magazine, looked like a wreck. She was wearing sweatpants that were too big for her. Her hair was in a messy knot on top of her head. Her face was pale, and her eyes were swollen and red. She was holding a set of keys. She must have let herself into the building while we were arguing. Alina, Mom said, her voice shifting instantly. It went from the screeching harpy tones she used on me to a soft, sugary coo. Baby, what are you doing here? Did you drive? You know you get anxious driving in the city. Alina didn't look at Mom, she was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, filled with shock. I heard you, Alina whispered. You heard what, sweetheart? Dad asked, trying to block her view of me. We were just leaving. Evelyn is having a bad day, she's not feeling well. Stop lying, Alina said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the air like a knife. I heard everything. I was standing here for 5 minutes. I heard what you said to her. You said she was cold and hard. You said you would disown her. We were just trying to reason with her, Mom cried, reaching out to touch Alina's arm. She's refusing to help with your wedding. She wants to ruin your special day. We were just defending you. Alina pulled her arm away. She looked at our parents with a look of pure exhaustion. You weren't defending me, Alina said. You were using me. You were using me as an excuse to take her money. We need the money for the venue, Dad insisted. For the flowers, for the dress, it's for you, Alina. I don't want it, Alina said. The silence that followed was total. My parents looked like they had been slapped. What? Mom whispered. I don't want the wedding, Alina said. Tears started to roll down her cheeks. I never wanted the big wedding. You did, Mom. You wanted the photos. You wanted to show off to Aunt Carol and the neighbors. I just wanted to marry Julian. But Julian's family, Dad stammered. Julian doesn't care, Alina shouted. It was a raw, broken sound. Julian hates all this stuff. We've been fighting every night because of the stress. We can't afford this life you're trying to build for us. I'm drowning, Mom, I'm drowning. She turned to look at me. She walked past our parents and stood in front of my doorway. You were right, she said to me. I looked at my little sister. For the first time, I didn't see the golden child. I saw a terrified young woman who had been crippled by too much help. About what? I asked softly. About me, she said. You said I was helpless. You said they crippled me. You're right, I can't do anything. I don't know how to pay bills. I don't know how to keep a job. I quit everything when it gets hard because Mom always tells me I don't have to suffer. But I am suffering. I feel useless. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. I saw you, years ago, that day in the snow. My breath hitched. You saw me. I was in the Jeep, she said. I saw you walking to the bus stop. You looked so cold. I wanted to stop. I really did, but I was scared. I was scared that if I stopped, I would have to admit that what Mom and Dad were doing to you was wrong. And if I admitted that, I would have to admit that I was part of it. So I just kept driving. I turned up the music so I couldn't think about it. She looked me in the eye. I'm so sorry, Evelyn. I've been sorry for 4 years. I felt the anger inside me start to crack. It crumbled away, leaving just sadness. Why didn't you say anything? I asked. Because I was a coward, Alina said, and because I was jealous. You were jealous of me? I asked, just as shocked as I was the first time I thought it. Yes, she said. You were real. You were out there in the world, fighting, building something. I was just a doll in a dollhouse. You have a career, you have respect, I have. Nothing, I'm just Alina the pretty one. That's all I am. She turned back to our parents. Her voice became stronger. I'm canceling the wedding, she announced. You can't, Mom shrieked. The deposits, the reputation. I don't care about the reputation, Alina yelled. I care about my sister, I care about my life. I'm not starting my marriage with stolen money. I'm not taking Evelyn's savings. Alina, you are making a mistake, Dad warned, his voice low and dangerous. If you do this, we can't help you anymore. Alina laughed. It sounded just like my laugh earlier. Good, don't help me, please stop helping me. Your help is ruining me. She looked at me. Evelyn, I know I don't deserve it, but I don't want to be alone with them right now. Can I come in? I looked at my parents, standing in the hallway looking defeated and small. Then I looked at my sister, who was finally standing on her own 2 feet. Yes, I said, come in. Alina stepped into my apartment. I looked at my parents one last time. Goodbye, I said. I closed the door in their faces. I heard them shouting for a minute, then footsteps, then the elevator ding, then silence. I turned to Alina. She was standing in the middle of my living room, looking around like she had landed on a different planet. Nice place, she sniffled. Thanks, I said. I paid for it myself. She smiled weakly. I know, 3 weeks is not a lot of time to plan a wedding, but it turns out, when you strip away the $75,000 of fluff, a wedding is actually pretty simple. Alina canceled everything. The ballroom, the caterer, the 10-piece band. She lost some deposit money, which Dad had paid, but she didn't care. She said it was the price of freedom. We found a new venue, the Lakewood Community Center. It cost $200 to rent for the afternoon. It wasn't glamorous. The floors were linoleum, and the walls were a beige color that reminded me of a dentist's office. But it had big windows that let in the sunlight, and it had a kitchen where we could heat up food. We did everything ourselves. It was fun, actually fun. Alina came over to my apartment every night. We sat on the floor, drinking cheap wine and making decorations. We made paper flowers out of old book pages. We strung up fairy lights that I had in my closet. For the first time we talked. Really talked. She told me about how suffocating it felt to be the perfect daughter, how she felt like she had to perform constantly. I told her about the loneliness of those college years. We cried a lot. We laughed even more. We were getting to know each other as adults, not as the roles our parents had assigned us. On the day of the wedding, the community center looked transformed. It didn't look expensive, but it looked magical. The fairy lights twinkled against the beige walls. The paper flowers looked artistic and unique. I was the maid of honor. I didn't buy a new dress. I wore a navy blue cocktail dress I wore to work events. Alina wore a white sundress she found at a vintage shop for $40. She had her hair down, loose and wavy. She looked younger, lighter. She looked happy. Our parents weren't there. They had sent a text to Alina saying they could not support this mockery of a wedding, and that they would be spending the weekend at the lake house to recover from the stress. When Alina read the text, she just shrugged. "Okay," she said. And she put the phone away. She didn't cry. She chose her peace over their approval. Grandma and Grandpa were there. Grandpa was in his wheelchair, wearing his best suit from 1980. Grandma was wearing a hat with a flower on it. She looked like royalty. Julian's family came too. I was nervous about them. Mom and Dad had made them out to be these terrifying snobs, but when they walked in, they were smiling. Julian's dad took off his tie and rolled up his sleeves to help set up the chairs. Julian's mom hugged Alina and told her she looked beautiful. They didn't care about the prestige. They just loved their son, and they saw that their son loved Alina. The ceremony was short. A friend of theirs got ordained online to officiate. I stood next to Alina. I watched Julian look at her. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room. He didn't care about the dress or the venue. When they exchanged vows, Alina's voice was steady. "I promise to be your partner," she said. "I promise to build a life with you. A real life, even if it's hard, even if we're broke, as long as it's ours." I felt tears prick my eyes. She was growing up, finally. After the ceremony, we ate. We had ordered 20 pizzas from a local place, and Julian's mom had made a huge salad. We had coolers full of beer and soda. I sat with Grandma and Grandpa at a corner table, watching the room. People were laughing. Kids were running around on the linoleum floor. It was loud and chaotic and wonderful. "You did good, Evie," Grandpa said, patting my hand. "We did good," I corrected. "Alina did a lot of this." "She's learning," Grandma said. "She's finally getting out from under their thumb, thanks to you." "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just said no." "Sometimes," Grandma said, "saying no is the most loving thing you can do. You forced her to wake up." Later in the evening, Alina dragged me onto the dance floor. The music was coming from a Bluetooth speaker. It was a cheesy pop song, but we danced anyway. We spun around, laughing, almost tripping over our own feet. "Thank you," Alina shouted over the music. "For what?" I shouted back. "For not writing the check," she said. We both burst out laughing. It was a joke that only we understood. A joke about the absurdity of our family, the pain of the past, and the relief of the present. I looked around the room. I realized that my parents' absence wasn't a hole in the room. It was just space. Space for us to be ourselves. Space for joy that wasn't performed. Space for love that wasn't purchased. I felt a profound sense of closure. I hadn't gotten the apology I wanted from my parents. I hadn't gotten the childhood I deserved, but I had this. I had this moment of pure, unadulterated reality. And it was enough. 2 months passed. Life settled into a new rhythm. Alina and Julian moved into a small apartment. It was a studio, tiny and cramped, but they paid the rent themselves. Alina got a job as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic. She loved animals. It wasn't a glamorous job. It didn't pay much. But every Friday she sent me a picture of her paycheck with a caption like, "Look, I earned this." I was proud of her. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dad. "We need to talk. Meet us at the Starbucks on 16th Street. 5 p.m. It wasn't a question, it was a summons. Old habits die hard. I stared at the phone. My heart did a little jump, a reflex of fear. But then I took a breath. I wasn't scared anymore, I was curious. I left work early and drove to the coffee shop. I walked in at 5 p.m. exactly. They were sitting at a table in the back. They looked diminished. That was the only word for it. They looked smaller. Dad's suit looked a little loose. Mom looked tired, her makeup not quite as perfect as usual. They had 2 coffees. They hadn't bought one for me. I walked over and sat down. "Hello," I said. "Evelyn," Dad said. He nodded stiffly. "We saw the photos," Mom blurted out. She was picking at a napkin, shredding it into tiny pieces. On social media, Julian's mother posted them. It was a nice wedding, I said calmly. It looked cheap, Mom said, but there was no venom in it, just a sort of sad confusion. Why was she wearing that old dress? Because she liked it, I said, and because she paid for it. We missed it, Dad said. His voice was gruff. He was looking out the window, refusing to make eye contact. We missed our daughter's wedding. You chose to miss it, I corrected him. You were invited. You chose not to come because it wasn't the show you wanted. Dad turned to look at me. His eyes were tired. We thought if we held our ground, she would come back. We thought she needed us. She did need you, I said. She needed you to be her parents, not her bankers, not her managers. She needed you to show up and clap for her, even if she was getting married in a shed. There was a long silence. The noise of the coffee shop buzzed around us, the espresso machine, the chatter of other customers. We want to see her, Mom whispered. She won't answer our calls. She's busy, I said. She's working, she's building a life, she doesn't have time for the drama anymore. And you, Dad asked. Are you done with us too? I looked at them. I thought about the anger I had carried for so long. I searched for it, but I couldn't find it. It had evaporated. I'm not done, I said, but the terms have changed. The terms? Dad frowned. Yes, I said. If you want to be in my life, or Alina's life, things change. No more money talks. You never ask me for money again. You never hold money over Alina's head again. You don't compare us. You don't play favorites. You treat us like adults and you respect our boundaries. And if we don't, Mom asked, her voice trembling, then we walk away, I said. For good, we have each other now. We don't need you to survive, we want you. But we don't need you, there is a difference. My father looked at me. He looked at the confident woman sitting across from him. He realized, finally, that he had lost control. He couldn't buy me. He couldn't bully me. He could only accept me or lose me. He nodded slowly. Okay, he said. Okay, we just want the family back, Mom said, tearing up. Then build it, I said. Build it with respect, not money. I stood up. I have to go. I'm meeting Alina for dinner. She's making burnt lasagna. Tell her, Dad started then stopped. Tell her we said hello. I will, I said. I walked out of the coffee shop. The air outside was crisp and cool. The sun was setting, painting the Denver skyline in gold and orange. I felt light. I walked to my car, got in, and drove toward my sister's apartment. I thought about the word justice. I used to think justice meant punishment. I used to think it meant my parents suffering the way I suffered. But as I drove, I realized that wasn't it. Justice wasn't about them losing. It was about me winning. Winning my peace. Winning my self-respect. Winning the relationship with my sister that they had tried to steal. I had spent so many years feeling like a victim, but I wasn't a victim anymore. I was a survivor, and more than that, I was free. I pulled up to Alina's building. I saw her in the window, waving at me. I waved back. I turned off the engine. I took a deep breath, and I went inside to live my life. If Evelyn's story resonated with you, you are not alone. So many of us have grown up in families where love felt like a transaction, or where we were made to feel invisible. It is incredibly hard to break those cycles. It is scary to say no to the people who raised you. But as Evelyn showed us, sometimes the only way to find peace is to draw a line in the sand. Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with your family? Did you struggle with the guilt? How did you find your own quiet justice? Please share your story in the comments below. Let's support each other. And remember to like and subscribe for more stories about finding strength in the hardest places. You are worth more than what you can provide for others.